Okay, we are now reconvened in open session. We will now consider action on closed session items. Mrs. Tossan.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I move the Board of Trustees authorize the purchase of approximately 80 acres of real property located in Rasharon, Texas, for future education facilities for a purchase price not to exceed $2.60 per square foot, and authorize the superintendent to negotiate and execute all necessary agreements, amendments, and closing documents to consummate the purchase.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tossan and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mrs. Helliger.
Yes, I move the Board of Trustees adopt a resolution authorizing the conveyance of a 100-foot access strip along the southern border of the 49.5-acre tract surrounding the Ferndale Henry Center for Learning campus to D.R. Hurton Ltd. as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Haliger and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Next, we will have our board member reports. First up is our activity report.
Yes, sir. This month, board members attended TASB XG Summit in Austin, HEB Excellence in Education Board Finalist Committee, Special Education Continuing Advisory Committee meeting, site visit to Lakeview Elementary, and Jazz Festival at Marshall High School.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Next on our agenda is 10B1, our audit committee update. We will be moving that to our February board meeting. Next, we will consider action on our consent agenda, and we will be pulling item 11A2.
And I'd also, excuse me, Mr. Radine, I'd like to also pull 11C2.
All right. May I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety as presented, with the exception of 11A2 and 11C2.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion?
I'd just like to point out to the board that the minutes in the consent agenda have been revised since the posting, and they are at our places.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Hearing no discussion, other discussion, excuse me, please vote. Motion passes. We will now consider item 11A2.
Mr. President, I move to approve consent agenda item 11A2 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice.
Wait a minute, because I think there's a certain motion that I'm supposed to read, Mr. Radine.
I'm sorry, Mrs. James. Go
So
ahead.
do we need to withdraw the motion, or Mr. Rep Morris?
Withdrawn.
Yeah, it can be withdrawn by consensus.
Okay. Then, we good? I move that the board order an election for trustees, position 3 and 7, and approve the order of election to be held on May 4th, 2018, as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none. I'm sorry.
Could you read that again? What's the date you have on that?
Oh, good point. It's written incorrectly.
The 2018.
It says 2018 in the answer, and it should be 2019. So, shall I start again?
Yes, ma'am.
My apologies. I move that the board order an election for trustees, positions 3 and 7, and approve the order of election to be held on May 4th, 2019, as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion?
Is the date right?
Yeah.
Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. We will now consider item 11C2.
Mr. President, I move to approve consent agenda item 11C2 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Mrs. Helliger.
So 11C2, consideration and approval of proposed addition of an early college high school at Thurgood Marshall High School for the 2019-20 school year. Is there any reason why we can't postpone this vote until a later date to give that community an opportunity really to get the proper communication for early college high school? What are the implications if we don't vote on it tonight?
Well, I know one specific implication is that, according to TEA, in a webinar that we participated in today, the designation window closes on February the 15th. So we'll need to make a decision prior to that time to continue to move forward. In addition to that, in a response that I provided earlier, it would impede planning in terms of recruitment. We need to move forward with the recruitment process. We need to move forward with communication about the benefits of the program and also recruitment of teaching staff and so forth. So the additional planning that we need to continue to move forward as we plan with the P-TECH programs would just set that back about a month.
All right. Any more comments, Ms. Hellier?
Thank you.
Mrs. James?
Turn my microphone off, and I meant to turn it on. Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So my question is to better understand the marketable skills that the students who would participate in this early college high school would have. So I understand from some of the correspondence that you've talked about an associate's degree, and you've talked about a certain number of hours towards, kids moving on to get their bachelor's degree. I think the term multidisciplinary studies or something is used, and it's a kind of a part of this program. I guess what I'm trying to understand is there, when a student at a community college gets a multidisciplinary studies degree, what does that allow them to do? What are they going to be good at when they finish that 2-year degree? I'm trying to understand what marketable skills they would have and that's what I'm asking.
Okay, so the benefit that they will have is obviously they're going to have a head start with college coursework, and potentially they could have an associate's degree. So for any student that is wanting to continue their education, that in itself, it's a benefit for them. Now, as far as marketable skills, that can be up for debate, and you and I can debate that probably all night and all day tomorrow. But as far as the benefit for them is a lot of what we provide our students here in Fort Bend ISD. When it comes to critical thinking, creativity, obviously time management, and viable study skills. Those are things that employers that they want. They want to see those traits in the students, whether they're graduating from high school, whether they have a few college hours, or they have an associate's degree. And even when you have a bachelor's degree, those are traits that employers are seeking from the people that they're employing. So when you consider it and you make a comparison to P-TECH, P-TECH's going to have more of a industry focus. The early college high school is going to have a focus in preparing students to go to the next level if they so choose to go to the next level.
Okay, so I hear that, and I think that's come through multiple times that we're preparing students to go to the next level. And I guess the reason I keep asking this is because I heard a speaker last weekend. You've heard us all talk about our XG training that we went to. And one of the speakers, and I can't remember if it was the dean of the College of Education at the University of Texas or if it was the Commissioner for Higher Education who was speaking to us. One of those talked about how when a student finishes their degree, whether that's at the University of Texas or at any other of our institutions of higher learning, they should be able to have marketable skills that they can articulate to a potential employer. I think it's great if we can get if the kids can get an associate's degree and go on to a 4-year college. But I also want us to be able, I want us, me, the community, the students, the counselors, the teachers, everybody to be able to articulate what the marketable skills are that these students are going to be learning in that program. The person giving the example used the idea of a philosophy degree or an English degree from the University of Texas. 2 degrees that are a little bit difficult to get jobs with sometimes. Another friend of mine has a child with an economics degree. What are the marketable skills that the students who graduate with those degrees and their bachelor's degrees can put on their resumes, can articulate to employers in job interviews, and can use as getting them to the next step? And I guess that's what I want to be very clear on. And if we're going to be, and if it's focusing on lifelong learner and things of that nature that are from the profile of a graduate, then that's okay, but I'm struggling with differentiating what this particular program is going to do and how it's going to separate those students from our Fort Bend ISD graduates.
Yeah, so I do want to add that one of the benefits of being in the early college high school program is that as you navigate the 4 years, it allows a student to change their mind as far as what they want to be when they grow up. Okay, so where in some programs, we are asking that as an 8th grader that you identify what you're going to want to do when you are through with that program. The early college high school program allows the flexibility for a student to say, 8th grade year, when they submit their application, to say, well, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a pharmacist. But by junior year, if they end up saying, you know, I have experienced through working with my friends or working with my family members or through the experience I've had with this teacher, I now am interested in this field and no longer want to be a pharmacist. The early college high school program provides the opportunity for that student to be flexible enough to say, I'm going to go down this path now, and I'm still going to have a benefit of receiving free college hours, and I'm still going to have the benefit of making that selection without losing any of the time or any of the hours that I put in during my four-year experience. So the flexibility is a benefit for students that may change course throughout the 4 years that they're in high school.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mrs. Tolsan.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So I appreciate that line of questioning, and I guess I view the early college high school a little bit differently. When I approached it, or when I was reading about it, I think the benefit in my mind is the fact that these students are being given an opportunity to gain college credit hours. It allows students who do not otherwise, or who have not traditionally had the opportunity to go to college, now have 2 years of college credit and only have to pay for 2 more years. So I don't view it like the P-TECH or even the CTE Center, where you're going and you're graduating with a certificate, and you can take that certificate and you can go to work, or you can take that skill and go to work. My brother was here earlier. He would kill me for saying this, but he spent 7 years in college because I'm sorry.
As some people found out.
I'm so sorry. And changed his major 4 times. because he was not really ready for that. He did not have what he needed when he went to college. And so I view this sort of twofold, as one, as a way for kids who traditionally cannot afford to, or do not have the opportunity to, or don't have 4 years to go to college. They can gain that college credit and then go to college and decide, this is where I'm going to take my 2 extra years, which would normally be your junior and senior type year in college. I mean, everybody knows the first 2 years, if you don't test out, you're taking English and you're taking math and you're taking all those building blocks. So if we can give our students those building blocks that provide them an opportunity to then go to a post-secondary institution and say, yeah, so now I have these building blocks and I want to do criminal justice, or I want to do construction, or I want to do, I'm not going to list all of his different majors, but that's the point, is that then you can take it and do that. And so what we're doing is providing, I think the marketable skills is the education. I guess that's the way I view it. It's the education that allows them to take it and go on and create a career after that. And that may not be for everybody. Someone may decide to take the technical path, or to take the CTE through the CTE Center or through the PTech. But I think it's good to offer this as another opportunity. That's the way I see it, as another opportunity. So I guess that's just the way I view it. And I just wanted to say, the lady that spoke earlier this evening, I think her name was Velma Pete. I don't know if she's still here, but I wrote down several things that she had to say about the 3-week summer bridge program, and make sure you staff it. And I think I said last Monday, let's make sure we have additional career counselors that really help guide these children, because we don't have it in a lot of our high schools. And if we're going to start programs that are leading to post-secondary, we have got to have really strong career counselors that stick with these kids the whole way and help them make these decisions. And she talked about business partners. We're doing that in our CTE Center. And I think, to Mrs. James's point, if we have business partners who can come in and help kids maybe make those decisions and those course selections, I think it's going to be critical to have that. And if we don't have it, then it's not going to be successful. And I'm not voting on something to go into Marshall High School and have it not be successful. I'm just going to say it right now, because we need to staff it, we need to fund it, we need to support it, and we have got to make a commitment to these kids and to keeping this program there. So I feel very strongly about that. So I think it's a great opportunity for kids, but I'm all in. As long as I'm on this board, I'm all in, committed to making it work and to making sure that we expand those opportunities.
Mr. Rosenthal.
So I appreciate both of your comments. So the prior December, a year ago, I sat in this room with a bunch of recent Fort Bend ISD graduates who ranged from freshman to junior in college. That was put on by Mr. Padaville. And there were a lot of things, and I had a whole lot of notes, but not having it with me, I'm just trying to remember a couple of them. But there were a lot of things that we learned from listening to those kids. And a bunch of students told us that they didn't even know how to communicate with their professors. They told us that they really had never learned how to study. And so giving them this exposure to college-level courses, that, to me, is marketable, because they're going to be more likely to succeed those last 2 years at whatever college, university they attend. And so I think that's helpful. And so instead of graduating from high school staring at a wall called 4 years of college, now it's just a short fence. They just got 2 more years. So, and I think the analogy, Ms. James, that you referred to from the UT, I don't see really any difference between somebody graduating from UT with a philosophy degree as having marketable skills, other than they graduated from college, they learned how to think, they learned how to navigate their way through college, and they succeeded. And so success is a marketable skill. And so I don't see any difference between that and this. So, and I agree. I mean, I said this last time, last week, that, it needs to be supported. That's why I asked about, whether we're going to be able to get teachers and whatnot. And so that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Mrs. Helliger?
I'm listening to the conversation. I guess I'm a little confused, a little bit. Ms. Tossan, when you discussed not voting for this, because I do agree that this is a great program for our kids. I'm just a little concerned around some of the supports for it. And so that's kind of why I asked the question initially, what would happen if we were to postpone this? And then I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what is my check box? What is my list of items that I would need to say, okay, I'm ready to really move forward to vote for this and make sure I'm comfortable, and then even the community is comfortable with understanding what this program will actually provide for them. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. We talked about support. Do we have the full support? I mean, how long is the plan? I mean, not having some of that information, I don't know. I don't know if I'm totally clear with that. I mean, am I missing something here?
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's your, just so I can wrap my head, what's your concern?
My concern is what everybody else is, what I think a lot of people's concerns is, are we putting this in to the school and it's going to be totally supported for long term?
Okay.
Not something just for a short-term period. We're not piloting this per se for a couple of years, and then it didn't work, so we're pulling it out. I mean, that's my concern.
Okay.
So I agree with that, which is why some of my comments a few minutes ago. But for me, that's the reason I said I'm committed to this, is because I really do think that comes from us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the board is who has to make that commitment that we're going to support it. We're the ones who are going to make the decision to fund it. We're the ones who are going to make the decision to be committed to it. And that was really the basis for some of my comments, is that I'm saying I'm fully committed to the program, to Marshall, to the students of Marshall. And it's our directive to Dr. Dupree and to this administration that we are the ones saying we want it supported. And whatever you need to tell us what you need to make it successful.
So then I'm going to create a shameless plug, then you almost have to, like you said, make sure that the people that are here are able to support it, because I think that's what happened. Not knowing the history of some of the things that have happened in the past, who made those decisions of, to move a program out of a school or not. I think when that same young lady stated something about the principal or the director of that program left, and I don't know that history, so excuse my ignorance on that one. So, who really made that decision? I don't know that.
Well,
so I just want to make
that's
sure.
The danger. I mean, I think that's the risk, right? I mean, that's the risk. If there's turnover on the board, if there's turnover in administration, that's always the risk.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not willing to say I'm not gonna vote for something that I think is gonna be open doors for kids or create opportunities for kids, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid the next person who sits in this seat might not support it.
Right.
I hope that they will support it. And, I said earlier, we don't do everything right, but the point is that we're driving
Mm-hmm.
to do what's right.
And I guess that goes back to my statement was what would I need to make sure that it's solid, and to your point, I'm sorry. Put it in policy, right? That we would have an early college high school at Marshall High School forever. Aren't you on that board? Aren't you on that committee? Okay. Yeah, because I think it's, I mean, I just want to make sure it's clear. I support this program wholeheartedly. I think it's important. I think there's still some things that we need to clarify. And based on some of the conversations that we had earlier today, Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Dupree, there's still a lot of communication that we need to do around it. And I think, you know, that's why I asked the question, what would happen if we postpone this vote? It wasn't necessarily a postponement, a vote because the early college, I don't believe the early college high school is the best thing. It's just making sure we have all of our ducks in order is really where my reasoning for and the communication plan around it. So I appreciate you all indulging me. Thank you.
Would you mind if I just responded to a couple of things you've said? Because,
Absolutely.
Because I do want to acknowledge, I understand completely the community's concern about the program and the risk that it's going to be there and then gone. Because that is something that has happened at Marshall repeatedly over the years, but it has not happened in the last 5 years. Yes, we have had some turnover in principals, and I think we have found the leadership team that's going to be there for the long term. That's our goal at this point. We've got leadership and, and an executive principal that we're investing in, a solid assistant sup who's supporting the school, and of course, everybody else sitting in front of us on the cabinet is supportive. But, our commitment to the community has been and will be, we will make this program successful. We're opening 100 spots in this school, 70 for Marshall kids. We know that we're going to have to work hard to fill those spots. We may not fill them all the first year. But if not, it doesn't mean we start pulling back resources. It means we've got to keep going. We do not in any way consider this a pilot program that we're going to try out for a few years. I mean, we joined the board. I joined the board. We've had many, many conversations about the importance of doing solid programming and supporting them in Willow Ridge and in Marshall. And so in this case, Marshall is it's top of our list. We're dedicated to this program. And truly, to your specific question, all the communication you're talking about is about to happen anyway. That is about to happen. That's what Joe's been speaking to, is the need to have those community meetings, to get in there and have that level of communication that they've indicated, and we've seen that clearly, that need, and we're moving forward. But I do think that at this point we need to hire college and career counselors to get in there, to start building the program, to start recruiting. We've already got the 8th graders in Missouri City queued up. They're excited. Their parents are excited and ready to go. So we now need to have the official go, and that's what we're asking for, is we want to go so we can just get things moving quickly.
Mrs. Tossian?
Yeah, just real quick, I just wanted to follow up and say, so thank you for that, because if we have the board and the superintendent committed, I think that's what we need to hear. But I just wanted to reiterate that we're queued up for that communication now, when it should have been done months. They shouldn't have had to fight for it, is all I want to say. So let's make sure that in the future they don't have to, that we're out in front of it, which is where we should have been.
Please vote. Motion passes. We will now consider action items. Next, we will consider action items 12A1, consideration and approval of proposed attendance boundaries associated with the balancing high school enrollment in the southeastern portion of the district. May I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve action item 12A1 as presented.
So I think this is just for deliberation of whether or not we want to consider boundaries, the high school boundary recommendation that was presented to us last week, or do we want to proceed with the building of high school 12 and delaying those boundaries options until later? I think is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So someone needs to make a motion?
No, so we need to determine if we want to make a motion to rezone, or if we want to proceed how the administration recommended this evening, which was to delay
Right.
that rezoning.
All right.
So we need no motion if we're going to delay.
Okay.
And I made my statement earlier, so I'll let others speak.
Mrs. Hillier?
And I made my statement earlier as well, with the fact that I believe that this is the right thing for us to do, is to postpone or delay until we have a holistic view on what we're going to do.
Mrs. James?
Yes, and I reluctantly, I agree with that path forward. Because I think you're right, there needs to be a holistic view. And I think that there needs to be a holistic view, and it needs to include programming. It may possibly need to consider a policy change that we talked about last week. And so reluctantly, I guess I'm fine with it. I'm a little frustrated that we couldn't. That I guess I never really saw a solution that addressed the recommendation that the board had made. I realized that we're going forward with this decision. I still am unclear on the unintended consequences, and I'm kind of surprised that we've not done a financial analysis of this accelerating the building of the high school, and I'm a little concerned about that. But I don't also really feel like I have a viable option to recommend or to ask the board to consider. There's something in the materials that honestly, I looked at it and didn't think it was a recommendation to balance, but I just was handed it a few minutes ago as the balanced recommendation. So without considering it or studying it, I couldn't ask the board to consider it. So.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Moving on to action item 12.2A, or 12.2, consideration and approval of proposed purchases exceeding $50,000 specifically for Elevate K-12 services. May I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve item 12A2A as presented.
I second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tossan and a second by Mrs. Helliger. Do we have discussion? Mrs. James?
Yes, I have a question about the number of students that would be able to access this program, and which campuses you're thinking. Is this a district-wide effort, or are we focused? Could you remind us where we're using this program now and what the plan forward is?
Yes, currently the plan is to have this at Willow Ridge, Hunter's Glen, and I know that Marshall High School currently is reviewing the program as well. And as far as the number of students, we're looking at 60 students at this point in time. And those 60 students are some of our most at-risk students that we have at those schools.
And is this program worthwhile enough that we use it at other high schools across the district, at other places where kids are struggling with the end of course exams, or would not?
So the data that we've received from the state in regards to student retesters that have retested for the end of course exams, the data that we have has some positive results, but I am going to ask that Dr. Indelicato come up and speak a little bit about the results. He's been studying this program and he's been leading the program.
Good evening. So yes, we studied some of the results, and kind of in a synopsis, the students that received the support via Elevate at Willow Ridge High School more than doubled the passing rate for those that did not receive the support via Elevate. And when we compared it to also other high schools, it more than surpassed what the other high schools did with their students that were tested in English 1. So we do feel that it has merit. There's some lessons learned along the way in terms of making sure we identify the right students. We certainly had some good things in place from partnering with both the students and their parents so they realize the opportunity and the urgency, because we're talking about our most at-risk learners that did not pass the EOC multiple times, and now they are a junior or even seniors, which puts their graduation at risk. So we felt we had some good systems in place, but there were some lessons learned along the way as well. We had some students that simply said, I don't want to take the retest again. I failed at number of times. I would just rather take the projects via the IGC committee, which has been in place for about 4 years. So we've kind of learned from that we're going to target seniors that are not IGC eligible yet, which is the individual graduation committee, where if they pass at least 3 of the 5, then the state allows them to do projects instead for the remaining 2. So if they are not yet IGC eligible, then we feel they'll be more open and committed to the process. The parents are very supportive and very appreciative of the opportunity we give the kids. So there's things we learned along the way that we know we can get even better at it. But again, both for the English 1 and the Algebra 1, when we look at the Willow Ridge students who received the support from Elevate and then did not, it was at least double the success rate. So we do feel it is making success with our most at-risk students that otherwise may not graduate. We're also considering it for McAuliffe Middle School as well, because that is our most at-risk middle school, and there's students there that also we feel if we intervene a little bit earlier, then they're a little more open to the support and success. And we know that McAuliffe is not performing where we want it to right now as well, so we would like to try that at the middle school level also.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes. So is this a fixed cost? I'm seeing $240,000 over a 3-year period. Is that a fixed cost, or does that increase with the number of students that end up using the system?
That's a good question. So it's a fixed cost per student, also based on the number of times they're seen. So the reason we piloted it at Willow Ridge is knowing the needs at Willow Ridge. Also, we wanted to have some data before we came to you asking for the additional permission to go beyond 50,000. The reason we chose Willow Ridge is at the high school level, they're the only level that is tested in December. So we had time to pilot it this fall, have them do the December retest, and then get the results in January to see was it effective, then to then be able to know should we proceed forward or was it not effective, we tried it but we need to go a different direction. So it is a fixed cost, but it's also dependent on the number of times the students are seen. And so at Willow Ridge, they were seen 24 times. They can be seen less or more, but 24 seems to be a pretty good amount based on working with Elevate themselves and then seeing how it worked with our kids this year. It's a matter of being seen 2 or 3 times a week for an extended period. And again, we think that the data does show that it was successful with some of our most at-risk learners. And we just want to get continuing to get better at identifying them and making sure they're committed as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Please vote. Motion passes. Next, we will review the future board meeting agenda items. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, sir. In February cycle, on the first meeting, we're going to do the TAPER. That's our Texas Academic Performance Report, our annual performance report. We're also have some bond procurements, as well as we're going to give an update on the Early Literacy Center and Early Intervention Center, along with just some other routine items.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to make a quick announcement here. I want the I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Before you do that, can I just make a comment on the upcoming agenda items?
Please.
Really, thank you. I just wanted to request, and I sent this to you in an email, but I wanted to state it while the other board members were here. I would like to request an update on the special education funding trends. You guys sent us a report, or Steve, I think you sent us a report or a memo on that in one of our board updates. I think it would be important as we're getting ready for the legislative session and school finance discussions to talk about how we're being impacted in the area of special education funding, since it's going to be dramatic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. All right. I wanted to make a quick comment here. I want the public to know that the board will be calling a special meeting for Tuesday, January the 29th, 2019 at 7 a.m. for the purpose of deliberating and taking possible action on an order calling a special election for trustee position number 5. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
We are adjourned.